And I want to introduce Abby. She is an undergraduate senior at IUPUI, majoring in interior design technology in the Purdue School of Engineering and Technology. She's also, hopefully, gratefully, minoring in German. And currently, she's very involved with other activities on campus. It's a very interesting story how she became a Germanophile. She said, I first began learning German in the 8th grade at Chesterton Middle School up in northern Indiana. From the first day of class, she said, I knew I loved the language and the culture of German. During our first week of class, students were shown a slideshow of images of German-American Partnership Program, or GAPP, which is an exchange program between Chesterton High School and Michigan City High School and Scheren Gymnasium in Pfaffenhofen an der Ilm. She studied hard for 4 years so that she could attend and qualify for this trip in her junior year of high school. So she set high goals for herself. And she was well equipped for a great international experience. She spent 5 weeks that summer living in Pfaffenhofen an der Ilm and also in Berlin. She returned her senior year of high school to complete a 5th year of studying German, which is phenomenal. And she decided then she wanted to continue her academic journey with German in college. And so she's since began the college in the fall of 2018, she's been able to advance her skills and knowledge of German language and culture. She's also an honors program, and that's how I met her. She was a student in my class. And she said, I'm an honors program. Do you have a project for me? And I said, oh, yes, I do. Because of her high level of skills in German language, I proposed that she do research in German language newspapers, illuminating the role of the Athenaeum in Indianapolis life. And she said, yes, I could do that. Or rather, she said, jawohl. And she pursued that and is going to show you her results tonight. I'm very proud of her of being really a wonderful student, interested in learning. She's actually interested in learning and is very diligent in attending classes and learning more. And so I'm going to, when I'm finished with my presentation, I'll turn that over to her. And then in the end, we can have entertain questions. So what I want to do this evening before Abby's program is to actually recycle a program that I was asked by the National Park Service to present in 2016. And this was in because the Athenaeum, I had written the National Historic Landmark nomination, which is the highest status that the United States awards to places, structures or places or whole communities. There's a number of National Historic Landmarks in the city of Indianapolis, James Wickham Riley House, for one, the Madam C.J. Walker Building, and also the Denzel Carousel, by the way, in the Children's Museum, and the Benjamin Harrison House. So there's a number of places. But the Athenaeum just got this distinction in 2016 and asked me I had to make the case before the committee. So let me run through this with you. And as I said, it'll be brief because Abby's going to present the good stuff. And by the way, this is Abby's encore performance because we attempted this in September and didn't have the technology to deliver it. And her presentation was so good, I wanted to make sure that she could present that again. So how do we set this up? And she's my techie person, so I'm relying on her.
So it appears that this computer is frozen.
This one's frozen?
Yes. So I'm going to open your file anyway and see if that works.
And she's calmly trying to solve this problem. And if she weren't here, I don't know what I would do. And usually I rely on my children or another former student over at Heron, Dee Dee Davis, who is a whiz at this and makes me look very good. So okay, is that on the screen now for everyone to see? All right. I hope everyone can see this now. This is set up in the format for the National Park Service. So what I had to do is explain, I had to make the case, why is the Athenaeum, das Deutsche Haus, important historically? And then really explain what it is. So a number of these, and these are just really beautiful pictures. The Athenaeum, of course, was built between 1893 and 1898, originally named the German House, das Deutsche Haus. And then in 1918, the name was changed to the Athenaeum. Its location is, it's sited right at Michigan, Massachusetts Avenue and New Jersey Street. It is between the historical commercial district, which grew up along Massachusetts Avenue, and historic residential area, which is Lockerbie Square to the south and east. And it is located, if you can see on the map there, it shows Monument Circle. It is really 1/2 mile from the very center of the city. In presenting this, we had to really organize and meet the criteria established by the National Park Service. So the themes, NHL means National Historic Landmark. We have a period of significance for the building from 1893 to 1946. And then the themes are creating social institutions and movements, which are part of the larger development of the United States and its culture, also expressing cultural values. And then within that, educational and intellectual currents, as well as architecture, because this building is a fine example of German Renaissance revival architecture. And it was built as a clubhouse. And of course, the education component is very important for one of the themes of the National Historic Landmark status. And we're on about 0.94 acres because it's a quarter of the block. And city blocks are 4 acres. Now, thanks to the wonderful collection of archives and photographs and other things at the IUPUI Special Collections and Archives, we have a wealth of insight into the historical development and its uses of the building. So number one, criteria is education. And in it, we can see the gymnasium with all of the equipment that was that the building had been kitted out with in the 1890s, but also the beer garden was used. So my joke is they are waiters training to serve in difficult banquets. I mean, in fact, the black trousers and white shirts and black ties were the standard gymnastic uniform. And the parallel bars and the mats were set up in the beer garden. And you recognize, of course, the buildings in the background. The building is a fine example of German Renaissance revival. So we have on the screen a 1907 picture emphasizing the East Wing. The West Wing there is in 1910. These are from the Bass Photo Company and compliments of the Indiana Historical Society. It's an imposing building. It was intended to be an imposing building. So looking at national significance, and the Athenaeum possesses national significance in the field of American education, being it was the home of the Normal College from 1907 to 1970. That's 63 years, but the Normal College itself goes back to 1866, the oldest school of physical education in the United States. And that continues here on the IUPUI campus because it then in the 1940s, it became, in 1941, became a part of Indiana University. and continued in the Athenaeum as part of Indiana University, and then eventually moved to its imposing home on the IUPUI campus. The Normal College was a creature of the Turners, of the North American Gymnastic Union, or Nordamerikanische Turnerbund. 1866, they founded their own school so that they could properly train gymnastics instructors to be in the different Turnvereins throughout the United States. So it's an interesting itinerary. Starts in New York, goes to Chicago, is burned out by the Great Fire, goes back to New York, goes to Milwaukee, goes to Indianapolis, back to Milwaukee, and then permanently comes to Indianapolis and into the Athenaeum, or Das Deutsche Haus back then in 1907. The instructors, the alumni of the Normal College become the pioneers of physical education in public schools throughout the United States. So if you liked phys ed, thank the Germans. If you hated phys ed, well, I guess it's the fault of the Germans. Okay. And then also national significance is the architecture. The building expresses in brick and mortar, art glass, and limestone the idea of what the Turner movement is all about, and the motto, mens sana in corpore sano. So it expresses in brick and mortar that motto, sound mind and a sound body, with its gymnasium, ball and concert hall, summer garden, club rooms, bowling alleys, and library, everything under one roof for a sound mind and a sound body. And it's an excellent example of German Renaissance style. It is designed by the local architectural firm of Vonnegut and Bone, and Bernard Vonnegut, the architect of the firm who was responsible for the building, his father was one of the founders of the first Turnverein in Indianapolis in 1851. And that's the view of the lobby on the first floor. The building has high integrity. So what we see here on these floor plans, which were published in 1898, the building is essentially the same. The floor plan really has not changed. And that shows the basement, the first floor, and the second floor. Now, there were alterations made in 1907 to accommodate the Normal College, and the college enhanced the building's significance and importance. Today, there's several organizations. The YMCA occupies and runs the gym. There's the Rathskeller Restaurant, the Max Kade German American Center of IUPUI, the Indiana German Heritage Society, the Athenaeum Turners, and a number of other groups are also make their home here. Then let's some definitions. Most of you know these, but a Turner is a gymnast. It's the German term. A Turner Hall or Turnhalle is a gymnasium, and also Confunction is a clubhouse. Turnerbund is the gymnastic union. A Turnplatz is an outdoor gymnasium, and we already showed you that picture of the waiters getting training there on the parallel bars. The Turner motto is mens sana in corpore sano, sound mind and a sound body, but also another one is frisch und frei, stark und treu, which we see carved in stone, and that's on the East Tower, fresh and free, strong and loyal. So there are two models which the Turners lived by. And the Turner history is the Turner movement began in Napoleonic Germany, meaning it's the period of Napoleon's occupation of the German states. The founder of this movement was Friedrich Ludwig Jahn, who's that bearded figure. His name is also found carved in the building on the gable of the East Wing. He founded this whole idea and also invented gymnastics equipment. And then it became also politicized. And so when we come to the revolution of 1848, which is depicted there in that colored picture, there was street fighting in all the streets throughout Germany and Austria. And this also starts in France, goes throughout all of Europe. So the revolution failed. So these enthusiastic revolutionaries, many of them were Turners, they immigrate, they flee many, and then coming mostly to the United States, but to some other places as well. So we also had the beginning of introduction of the Turner movement actually in the 1820s after the Napoleonic Wars. The Turner movement, the Turnverein movement was introduced first. Turnverein, and Verein means club, in Cincinnati in 1848. And the national organizations, Germans are very well organized. 1850 is the national organization. And the Sozialer Turnverein, or the Athenaeum Turners, founded in 1851. And then in 1892, they sell stock, have a stock association to raise money to build a new home because they had other smaller accommodations before. German Renaissance revival. So in the 16th and 17th century, throughout the Reich, and then back then it was still the Holy Roman Empire. We had examples of city halls, guild halls, houses, number of examples, and then it will be revived. Just as in the United States, we have colonial revival, Renaissance revival, there's German Renaissance revival. And we can find numerous examples in St. Louis, Chicago, Cincinnati, and other cities with sizable German-American populations. And what that style does is it expresses German ethnic identity. And of course, that's what's expressed in the Athenaeum because the original name is Das Deutsche Haus, the German house. And it is a fine example, and the National Park Service recognizes that. There's continuity. The building still expresses ethnic identity, despite the fact that the name was changed. It still expresses mens sana in corpore sano, with its current usage of the gymnasium, of cultural activities, of music. And so it continues to this day. Vonnegut and Bone used oftentimes on many of their buildings a shield or Wappen motif, and we see that in the building. And we have a Wappen or the shield combined with a wreath. And we can find that in stained glass. We can find it in carved wood, in plaster, as well as in carved stone. DH is Deutsches Haus, and STA is the Sozialer Turnverein Aktiengesellschaft, which is there on the screen. And that's the organization that built the building and owned the building until for 99 years until 1991, when it was turned over, the building was turned over to the Athenaeum Foundation. And we have these wonderful details which have survived. For instance, that wonderful door that you see is actually the original door to the men's room in the Ratskeller. The music cabinets for the Musikverein, and then we can see the lettering there for the Turnsaal, or the gymnasium, to enter from the classroom into the gallery. And as I said, it's the integrity and there's continuity. The beer garden is still in use and is a popular place. And you can see on these pictures how 100 years later, the Ratskeller, the main Ratskeller room, is essentially the same. Furniture has changed a little bit, and well, the clothing, but the building, that room is essentially the same. We can see the same thing in the vestibule. And overall, the building, it would be a building that the founders would recognize as their own, because essentially we have this continuity and high integrity. And thank you very much. And I'll turn this over to Abby, and she will explain to you her findings resulting of her research.
All right. I'm going to move over here. All right. Hopefully this is working. There we go. All right, so I am Abby Koster, and I'm here to present my research titled Das Deutsche Haus, as reported in the Indiana Tribüne. And these dates are shown on this screen are the range of dates that I looked at in the newspapers. So we'll get into that. So just a little bit about me. Professor Sum did introduce me. Here's a little bit more, just some of my involvement, awards and scholarships, both on and off campus, and then work as well on campus and off campus as well. So let's touch on what this research project was exactly. So the research project actually began in the fall of 2022, when, like Professor Sum said, I needed honors credit for a class, and his class just happened to be the one that I picked because it was the one that I really enjoyed, and I knew he'd give me something interesting to do. And so for honors college students here at IUPUI, we have different methods of getting this honors credit. It's essentially something that you need to get in order to keep your scholarship or your standing, etc. Typically, it's done through internships, honors courses that are offered on campus, typically only to science students, or honors contracts with professors, which is what I ended up doing. So the project that Professor Sum set me out to do was finding articles about Das Deutsche Haus, or similar or related phrases in the Indiana Tribüne during the time frame from the 1st of January 1893 to the 31st of December 1898. After locating the articles, I would have to translate them out of Fraktur Deutsch, interpret them, and then create an entry for that article. And there were hundreds and hundreds of articles. So for those of you maybe unfamiliar with the German language or Fraktur Deutsch specifically, this is what the alphabet looks like. It's quite difficult to read, and it's very different from modern German. And so not only did I have to translate these as an English speaker, I also had to decipher what a lot of these letters were, and then decipher the words, and then the whole meaning of the sentence or the article. So Das Deutsche Haus, or the German House, is a National Historic Landmark located at 401 East Michigan Street in Indianapolis. I think a lot of people are familiar with this and might not have any idea what it actually is. I think a lot of my friends are more familiar with it for Coat Check Coffee because we all love coffee shops. But now when I walk past it, I appreciate it a lot more in every aspect. So it was originally built to be the home of the Soziale Turnverein and other liberal German societies that didn't have their own home or hall. It is mentioned or is the main subject of many, many articles in the Indiana Tribüne. So in order to access all of these articles that I used for this research, I used the Hoosier State Chronicles. This is an online newspaper database that is operated by the Indiana State Library and funded by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services. Essentially, this database has digitized hundreds of historic newspapers so that I don't have to go through the process of looking in newspapers that are over 100 years old and finding specific phrases. This made it a lot easier for me, even though I did still come up with so many articles. So a little bit about the Indiana Tribüne. It was one of several German language newspapers published during the mid to late 1800s and then into the early 1900s. The papers are almost entirely written in Fraktur Deutsch. There's a couple English articles, but anything written in the German language was written in Fraktur, and it covered every and all topics in the city. And obviously the German House was a large center of German culture in Indianapolis, so it was a popular topic. So a little bit more about just German newspapers in general in the city. The Indiana Tribüne was just one of actually quite a few newspapers published in the 1840s and then into the 1910s in Indiana. The historic landmark are shown right here and on the following slide, and then actually on the next slide following that one, it was placed at Pearl and South Delaware Street in Indianapolis, which is right at the county jail. It's actually missing from the site, but it goes into a little bit more detail regarding the German language newspapers as a whole. And it does touch on a couple of the other names of the newspapers that were popular. So this is the other side of that plaque. It was installed in 2017 by the Indiana Historical Bureau and the Indiana German Heritage Society. So just a couple of pictures provided. This was the installation day and the revealing. So there's the actual physical plaque as compared to just the photos. And now looking at the articles. So these articles regarding Das Deutsche Haus or similarities to that topic, they covered all of these different ideas. So I won't read all of these to you, but not only was it construction and that physical house itself, but also the Turners, different festivals, bowling leagues, the Freidenker Sunday School, euchre parties, private parties, holidays, anything and everything. So just a couple of important preliminary dates and events regarding Das Deutsche Haus. The grand opening of the East Wing was February 22nd, 1894, which is George Washington's birthday. It's a very popular and important date when looking up and researching Das Deutsche Haus. The Freidenker Sunday School opens just a couple of months later in September of 1894. And then another big event was the inauguration of the West Wing, which the inauguration celebration actually happened over a span of multiple days in June of 1898. So here's just an example of what I think is a very high quality image and a little text about Das Deutsche Haus. So here, and this is January 8th of 1894, they're showing kind of what they're imagining for this entire building to look like. So if you can see kind of right here is the divide. So this is that east wing that they originally built. And then this over here was the west wing and plans that they thought they would potentially go with. And there were actually a couple of different ideas for this west wing, and this was not what was built, but this was kind of introducing and really getting people excited about this structure. So then looking at the importance of gymnastics at the German house, this is just simply 2 weeks worth of time. These were major events that were listed in the newspapers. So on July 31st, 1895, we have the Turnlehrertag or Gymnastics Day. This is planned out and this is a very, very big deal. And they end it with a ball at Das Deutsche Haus. On August 11th, 1895, we have Turnlehrertag or Gymnastics Instructor Day, Gymnastics Teaching Day. Is planned as a 3-day event with educational lectures. And then moving into August, anyone wishing to take part in a field trip to Fairview for a gymnastics competition is encouraged to meet at Das Deutsche Haus by 2 p.m. on the 13th of August. So here's another photo, and I believe this photo was also in Professor Salm's presentation, but this was the gymnasium where the training took place, and all this equipment is gone for the most part in this room, and this is where the YMCA open gym is today. Bowling was also another important activity that took place at the German house. So looking in August of 1894, a large bowling tournament is announced that will take place at the German house, and there are quite substantial prizes involved for the top performing bowlers and teams. So this photo actually shows 10-pin bowling, which is American. This was not built during the time period that my research took place, or it was built towards the end, but just an idea of kind of the importance as well as the attention that this space brought to the community. Again, I will not read all of this, just touching on it. This was kind of one of the bigger articles I found in my research from the 15th of January, 1896. So this was an annual meeting. They went into detail and anything finance related regarding the new construction of the building and some of the plans that they were looking to do. And they wanted at least 65 feet of land. and they ended up doing 135 feet and 202 feet deep to build the additional wing. So then a little bit later, still in January, we have just some floor plans that they were looking to do for this new wing, kind of how everything was going to connect. Again, here we have a couple different options for just one section of the building. And some of these are pretty similar, I believe, to what was built, and some of them are completely different. And then this, we're looking at some of the elevations for the exterior of the structure. I believe there might be another photo. There were 4 different plans for the West Wing, and they ended up going with, correct me if I'm wrong, 4?
Yeah, 4.
Yes. So German appreciation, this was the model location for German appreciation in the city. In January of 1896, the author of the article that I found actually claims that the German House has increased respect for everything German in Indianapolis. He notes how splendid the building is, even though it's not finished, and he believes that it will be one of the most spectacular society buildings in the country when it's done. He is, I think, speculating about $60,000 still needs to be raised in order to complete the remainder of the building. And then again, on that same day, and actually the same column of the paper, the German House is highly praised in the paper and is considered a center of German life in Indianapolis by another author. So this is just a couple of my favorites of the articles that I did research. So number 1 was the engagement party on the 2nd of October, 1895, in the Kleine Stadtherold. So this is just a column in the paper. It's kind of like the quick news snippets for the day. So a happy couple celebrates their engagement at the German House. And there will also be a meeting of the German Women's Aid Association on Friday afternoon at 3. So they kind of clumped a bunch of stuff together in der Kleine Stadtherold column, which was quite interesting because everything was just considered important, it seemed like, at the house. So the hat was February 12th, 1896. Again, that same column, the Veterans Association meeting was the previous Sunday, and a man took the wrong hat as he mistook it as his own, and he can return and get his hat back at 504 North Delaware Street, with which Professor Selm told me the other day that this has happened to him. So not only in 1896, but also in the recent past. The piano recital, so this was the 20th of March, 1896. This was its whole own section in the paper. It was going to take place at the German House on March 21st, and admission was only 50 cents. The 4th of July, so I thought this was quite interesting. They did celebrate the 4th of July, and not was it interesting because it's a German location in the US, but because they had so much many other things going on. So they did celebrate. Starting on Friday night, there was a big concert with fireworks at the German House. So really, this was the heart of German society in Indianapolis. So a couple of short list of lessons that I learned throughout this research. Some German Americans in Indianapolis held tightly to their German roots, and Das Deutsche Haus promoted their culture and traditions. Das Deutsche Haus was not just a building, but a second home to many of the people in the community who utilized it. Don't take anything for granted. Take a closer look at everything around you because you never know what you might learn, and always ask questions. So in conclusion, this research taught me it taught me many lessons besides just telling me what happened at Das Deutsche Haus in its early years. So I am very thankful to have had this opportunity and be here today to present it to you on Zoom. This is only the beginning of a world of research. So using German language newspapers to help or to learn about historic buildings is a very unique task to say that you have done. And I've only scratched the surface. There are still articles remaining in the Hoosier State Chronicles, and I hope that I can inspire someone else to want to have this historical research background as well. And I hope that this historical research continues. And that is the end of my presentation. If we have any questions, I can take those.
If anybody does have any questions, we can open up your. Here we go. Justin, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Abby, thank you for a really great presentation. I really appreciate all the nice information that you had about Hoosier State Chronicles, as I'm the one that manages that program. So thank you. And actually, my question is related to Hoosier State Chronicles. So when you were using it as a platform, what were things that you liked about it? And then what are things that we could improve? Especially with German newspapers, because we're considering doing another German language newspaper digitization project if we get some NEH funding. It was a newspaper called the Bern Witness, which was published up north near Fort Wayne. And it was sort of part German, part English. And it was a newspaper devoted to the temperance movement. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, I'd just like to hear what you thought was great about Chronicles and what stuff we could improve.
Yeah. So things that I really did like is that I was able to save my searches because my searches did come up with, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of articles. And then I was able to research and save my search so that I kind of knew which ones I had already gone through. And then in addition, I was able to search terms, which definitely helped. And then it would highlight them so that I could find the article instead of having to read through the entire article or the entire newspaper to find where those were. I think biggest complaints or things that I found more difficult. I don't think I have very many complaints. There were a couple of times where I just snipped articles. And I wasn't sure if there was a way to maybe do that without saving the entire newspaper as a PDF, but very few complaints.
Awesome. Yeah, the snipping tool is a little weedy. Like I know full blown, like especially sometimes if you zoom in the page and then you try to snip after you've zoomed in, it won't do it. So sorry about that. My best suggestion for you in the future is either if you're using Windows, opening up the clipping tool and just doing a clip that way, or if you have a Mac, you can do Command-Shift-4 and it'll automatically open up like the clipper in Macs, and then you can just do it that way. Yeah, that's something that I'm hoping to improve as time goes on, is that clipping tool. I know it's not ideal, but anyway, again, great research. This is wonderful what you've put together. And because I went through the German newspapers myself when I was working on my German freethinkers research, which was the last lecture. And I wish I had had somebody like you around, because I'm not that versed in the German language as you might be, or my colleague Nick Johnson. But I tried my best. A little bit of Google Translate and then running things by my friend Nick. And I was like, is this right? And he's like, yeah, it's good. So yeah, again, excellent research. And I think this would be an incredible project for another person to pick up, especially like, like an honor student like yourself, or a graduate student with the public history program, museum studies. So again, great work. And again, thank you so much for plugging Chronicles. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I have a comment too. I worked with these papers a lot in the day. Two things. One, to Justin, the Spottvogel newspaper. I think there are quite a few of them still extant there. That was the literary, cultural extension of Tribüne and Telegraph on Tribüne was the final version of the paper, because the Telegraph paper combined with the Tribüne. And that chronicled German life in India like nothing else did. But the Spottvogel did a lot of the cultural stuff. And it's so cool. One of his students, similar to Abby, but before her, Tom Meunier, did a wonderful work, which we should publish, on the antebellum German language theater of Indianapolis, using the newspapers, going through and looking at the recension and the critique and the announcements and so forth. It was a stunning paper, and absolutely a stunning thing, very much as Abby has done, to show what you can learn from the papers, but how extensive German cultural and German language life was in Indy, even very early on. So Abby, thanks again for your work and your efforts and calling attention to these papers. They're fabulous things. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up to Giles about the Spottvogel. So that was a project that Steve Schmidt and Chandler Leidy had worked on when they were working on Hoosier State Chronicles before I was hired on. And we have some of those files, and I've been organizing them. And hopefully within the future, in some time in the future, we'll have some issues available on Hoosier Chronicles, Hoosier State Chronicles. So yes, I found those. Those are sort of those projects that were started but never finished. So my hope is that eventually we'll get back to those and get some of those online too. So thank you for bringing them up.
We even had the idea at one point of resurrecting something called the Spottvogel, and as a kind of quasi-cultural, satirical German-American item, but didn't get too far with that. Thanks, and thank you, Justin, for what you're working on with that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's the Spottvogel stuff. And my hope is that we'll do more of that in the future for sure. So, but yeah, great stuff all around.
You have any other questions?
Hello.
Norbert?
Yes, Abby, I wanted to ask where you are in your academic experience, and what do you plan, and where might you take what you've learned in studying German and doing this research? You have any plans to take it further?
I'm not sure. So there are still a couple of articles that I need to complete for the time frame that I listed in the presentation. There are still a couple more. And so after wrapping that up, I will be sending that final document over to Professor Selm, which is already, I believe, 30 pages long, without an abstract or a title page. So it was a lot of work for 5 years. I am a senior, so I'll be graduating in May. And after that, I have accepted a job at an architecture firm. And so I'm not sure where exactly this will take me. I would love to continue studying German and learning, and if that means reading more newspapers in Fraktur Deutsch, so be it. I never want to lose this, not only the skill, but also all of the knowledge that I've gained.
Well, I'm sure whatever you do, you're going to do well, because you did very well tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a note here from Emily McLaughlin saying, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Abby and William. Anybody else have questions or comments to add? Well, I think you did a great job tonight, Abby.
Thank you.
And I would be proud if you had been my high school student. I was a German. And here's Claudia. Claudia, you want to unmute yourself? Can you? Claudia?
Okay, just a quick question, because I had you in a German class at one time, it's been a while, and you did minor in German. So can you tell me how confident you felt in your language skills to tackle this project? Because it seems that like it was pretty challenging. I think FATU is challenging for even native German speakers. And then the language itself, then to translate it into English is challenging as well. But you handled that very well with, well, not as a German major, but as a German minor. I mean, did you get at any point to a stage where you said, this is just too much, I can't handle it, I don't know how to go on anymore? You never, or did you have to reach out for help?
I wasn't very confident in my German skills in the sense of translation. I feel like I could speak and read for the most part, and I'm okay. But the whole comprehension aspect was very difficult. So at the point when I started this in the fall of 2020, I had taken one German class every semester. I'm currently in the German translation practice course, and I wish I would have taken it before starting this, because that has helped me tremendously. Even reading over some of these articles again, it makes more sense, and I'm able to, I think, better translate them. I don't think it ever got to the point where it was too overwhelming in the sense that I didn't think I was capable. It just slowed me down. That's why there are still articles that I need to finish. But it definitely is challenging. I would say doing some sort of translation-based course prior to taking on a task like this would be very beneficial.
Okay. Well, that's good to know for anybody who teaches German out there, yeah? So those are the things that translation classes can teach you. You don't have to be fluent, but you learn skills that you can apply to a project, yeah? Especially if you have some kind of background in the field that you're dealing with. So I think this is, as an honors project, this was very challenging and very involved. I would say you did a lot more than some of my honors students have done in their honors project. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Well, do we have any additional questions or comments from anyone? Anybody else in our audience?
Well, let me, can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
I had a number of other students before Abby, and they were looking in the English language newspapers. And then I was thinking, well, Abby has German skills. And I thought, I just wish she had an honors project. Well, my dream came true. She said, oh, I have an honors project a few months later. Do you have a project for me? And I said, yes, I already have it thought up. And what's amazing is that I said, can you do this? She said, yes. This, yes. Very positive. She took on the project, and I don't know, she may have thought it was, or some people may have thought it was a monstrous project, but Abby just accepted it and did the job. And she's just amazing. I'm very happy to have a student like her. I wish I had more students like her, and not just the German part, but a very positive attitude and interested in learning more, and just beyond the classroom as well. So thank you very much, Abby. I really appreciate it. And then Janet,
What I found interesting, this is Ruth Reichman, was when she said learning German with newspapers. Isn't that wonderful? There are so many ways for teachers to teach German. And there are so many resources out there. And I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yes.
and that means a lot coming from Frau Dr. Reichman. because Ruth is one of the founders of Indiana German Heritage Society and has put a lot of thought and effort into how to teach German, and then also using local resources. So she was a real pioneer in that field. And you know, I learned something from you, Ruth, and I thank you for it. And so is Abby. Are there any other questions? So Janet, what we're going to do is just remind people that our next program is the 13th of April. And it'll be on the German origins of NASA by way of a town in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. And then May 11th, historic Indianapolis German churches. And then in June, the sad end of Madge Oberholzer. And so those are all very interesting topics. And I am also very interested in learning more. So I invite everyone to come back to the next Stammtisch, April 13th, and continue with us as we've been doing since the 1980s of trying to learn, research, learn, discover, and share this information with not just fellow German Americans, but anyone who's interested in this very interesting topic, which largely has been ignored, you know, for a long time, and we're interested in exploring it. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. That'll end our presentation tonight. Thank you, Abby.